The cold night air was still as an elderly black man walked alone down a quiet street, his cane tapping softly against the pavement. He had seen a lot in his time: wars, struggles, and victories. But nothing could have prepared him for what was about to happen. Out of the shadows, a group of young men appeared, their voices low and full of cruel laughter. To them, he was just an easy target, someone too old to fight back. They had no idea who they were dealing with. As they closed in, hurling insults and threats, the old man didn't flinch. He had faced real danger before, far worse than these thugs could ever imagine. But he wasn't looking for a fight. Not yet. What happened next would leave them shocked, the entire neighborhood talking, and the internet in disbelief. Because this wasn't just any old man. This was a legend. The leader of the group, a tall guy in a hoodie, stepped closer, a smirk on his face. "What's wrong, old man?" "Lost," he mocked. The others chuckled, their confidence growing. They saw weakness, someone too frail to stand up for himself. But they weren't looking closely enough. The old man stayed silent, his eyes calm, almost studying them. He had seen that kind of arrogance before, on battlefields, in the eyes of enemies who thought they had already won. But he knew better. His hands, weathered with time, had once held rifles, saved lives, and fought for a country that didn't always fight for him. One of the younger men nudged his friend. "Come on, he ain't gonna do nothing," he said, stepping forward. The old man sighed, shifting his grip on his cane. If only they knew who they were messing with. If only they knew what he was capable of. The night felt heavier now, the streetlights flickering as if sensing the tension in the air. The old man exhaled slowly, steadying himself. He had spent decades learning patience, knowing that sometimes the greatest strength was restraint. But restraint only worked on those who understood consequences, and these boys clearly didn't. One of them, eager to prove himself, reached out and shoved the old man's shoulder. "What, you two scared to talk?" he taunted. The others laughed, their voices echoing down the empty street. They had no idea they were provoking someone who had stood face to face with real danger, someone who had fought in places so brutal that even their worst nightmares couldn't compare. A nearby shopkeeper watched nervously from his window, recognizing the old man but saying nothing. The city had changed, but respect was fading. Did these kids even know whose presence they were in? Or would they have to learn the hard way? The old man took a small step back, his grip tightening on his cane. The boys mistook it for fear, exchanging smirks as they closed in. But if they had paid attention, really looked at him, they would have noticed the way his posture shifted, the way his breathing steadied, the way his eyes remained sharp and focused. One of them, impatient, lunged forward, grabbing at his coat. That was their first mistake. With a sudden, precise movement, the old man sidestepped, causing the attacker to stumble forward. The others hesitated, confused. How had he moved so fast? He was supposed to be slow, weak. The leader's smirk faded. "Who is this guy?" he muttered under his breath, sensing something wasn't right. The old man said nothing, his stance unwavering. He had seen this before, young men mistaking cruelty for power. But real power wasn't in fists or numbers. It was in skill, experience, and knowing exactly when to strike. The street felt quieter now, as if the night itself was holding its breath. The group exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence wavering. Something about the old man didn't add up. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't even angry. He was just waiting. Then, before they could react, a distant voice called out from behind them. "Hey, what's going on here?" The boys turned to see an older man stepping out of a nearby shop, his face pale with recognition. He wasn't looking at them, he was staring at the old man, his expression a mix of shock and respect. You don't know who that is, do you? The shopkeeper said, shaking his head. The gang leader scoffed, trying to brush off this sudden tension. Just some old guy, he muttered. The shopkeeper took a step closer. That old guy is a war hero, a legend. And if I were you, I'd walk away. Now. But it was already too late. The gang leader let out a short laugh, shaking his head. A war hero? Yeah, right, he scoffed, but there was hesitation in his voice now. The others weren't laughing anymore. The old man still hadn't moved much, but something about him felt different, like a storm waiting to break. Then, just as the leader took another step forward, the old man finally spoke. You boys ever heard of the 2nd Infantry? His voice was calm, steady, but it carried weight. The shopkeeper's eyes widened. No way, he whispered. The gang leader let out a short laugh, shaking his head. A war hero? Yeah, right, he scoffed, but there was hesitation in his voice now. The others weren't laughing anymore. The old man still hadn't moved much, but something about him felt different, like a storm waiting to break. Then, just as the leader took another step forward, the old man finally spoke. You boys ever heard of the 2nd Infantry? His voice was calm, steady, but it carried weight. The shopkeeper's eyes widened. No way, he whispered. The old man sighed, loosening his grip on the cane. I fought battles before you were even born. I've seen men fall. I've seen fear in the eyes of real warriors. And right now, I see it in yours. The leader clenched his fists, but his hands were shaking. The truth was sinking in. He had picked the wrong man. Then, in one swift motion, the old man tapped his cane on the ground, just once. A sharp, precise sound that carried through the silence. From the shadows, another voice spoke. Is there a problem here? The gang turned to see two men standing just beyond the streetlight, their posture strong, their eyes locked onto the group. Veterans, brothers in arms. They had been watching. The gang leader swallowed hard, his confidence shattered. Without another word, he took a step back. The others followed, their bravado crumbling. One by one, they disappeared into the night. The shopkeeper exhaled in relief. You didn't even have to touch them, he said, shaking his head in amazement. The old man chuckled, tapping his cane lightly. Sometimes, son, the strongest thing you can do is stand your ground. Then, with a knowing glance at the shadows, he nodded. The two figures melted back into the night, always watching, always ready.